All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hello, oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, that recorded smattering of applause almost warms my heart. On a Monday, it is our Monday show. Wherever you are, however you are, I'm glad you are here for a moment or two to take us in. We are 2 to 4 in the East, 11 to 1 in the West, and we're a little wobbly on both start and finish times, meaning we may start a few minutes late. We also finish usually a few minutes late. But the goal and the original mission statement took us to the 2 hours, which is somewhere between 11 and 1 in the West and 2 to 4 in the East. Kim is here. She is my stalwart companion. She's very stalwart and very companion today. And Tony is also here.
Thanks, Tony.
And he has rallied a bunch of media that we can review together in just a few minutes. It is it's been a wild weekend. I mean, we got off the air on Friday, and Donald Trump and the new administration were just getting to work on dumping a bunch of people who were key military figures. And I got a lot of email from viewers and listeners to the show who referenced David K. Johnston in that regard. And note that David K. Johnston said that when that happens, that's really a sign that the coup is in place. We'll talk about that, but I'll also, and of course, tomorrow when David K. Johnston comes through, we'll visit this in a bigger way. But I think what is important is that, as you know, I feel as though there is a rising, complete authoritarian hold that's been taken in Washington, and I think you need look no further than to see the way in which Congress has been cowed by this president. So Trump can really do what he wants, it would seem, without any pushback thus far. And that appears to continue to be the case. And he's been most aggressive. I think the biggest flex in the last couple of days in the area of the military. And the military is critical to a rising authoritarian. So again, I will get to that in just a moment. I'm just kind of, before I get too deep into the details, I want to note that Jessica Denson is coming in the second hour. Jessica of, I think, the rising number of people who realize, or at least getting their voices out on the issue of the last election. As you know, this is a place, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not, but I'm just in general more convinced than ever that the questions surrounding this last election are legitimate. And I will continue that conversation with Jessica Denson. We've given you one way in which, that is to say, demonstrably it's the case when you talk to Greg Palast. Palast has been on here, as you know, multiple times. He's a friend of the show, and he shows his math in large measure. It's not some statistical workout that he does on voter suppression. He actually has prima facie evidence of this in swing states. As you know, Donald Trump carried all the swing states, which was a bit of a reach given how tight the election was. I mean, not impossible, but a bit of a reach. And in that framework, we have a conversation about the voter suppression that might have quite easily moved the election the other way. But this really, in Jessica's world, isn't about voter suppression. It's about the ways in which there might have been the long arm of Elon Musk involved in manipulating this election. Now, the only thing I'll say about that here, and then we'll talk about it the next hour, is that if you look at the way in which they are operating now, Elon Musk and his Doge team, they move in, they crash major government agencies, and they ask questions later. If you look at that MO, you can't tell me then that it's inconceivable that someone like that would manipulate results. I mean, you'd see them not playing by the rules. So I'd suggest, and based on that and a couple of other details, I think Jessica has way more details than do I, that the nature of their methodology approaching this past election was such that with Starlink involved, with Musk involved, with Musk knowing the results hours before the election was over. These things and these fragments begin to put together a clearer picture of what's happening. So, they've changed my configuration here.
Romania Animal Rescue for $20 and a comment. All of Eastern Europe is in danger.
It is true. It is true. Romania, big shout out and thank you for that. Thank you for a crowdfunded show. So really love that. I want to make sure that I'm seeing what's happening. There is, I would also say this. I think it's true that all of Eastern Europe is right to be concerned. I would even say all of Europe should be concerned, and all of Europe is concerned. They should be, and they are. The reality of what's happening with this Trumpian policy toward Russia, it was a quick pivot, and now, frankly, America is clearly in the Russian camp. I mean, if you invite Russia to the peace talks for the end of the Ukraine-Russia war, and you don't invite Ukraine, I mean, tell me what that is. That's a carve-up of Ukraine without them even being a party to the carve. It's outrageous, but that's where we are. And so increasingly, we will get into some of those details. There's so much going on. You need to increase your show hours, says Sally C. How about 6 or 7 days a week, or increase to 3 hours a day? Thank you. I do think there's so much going on, and many a day I wish I had another hour.
Maybe you need to make it like the Midas Network, where this is just one of the shows on the Mark Thompson Network.
That's an idea.
You pull in other broadcasters,
other creators, as they call them. Yeah, I will congratulate the Midas Network people, because they have surpassed, I believe, Joe Rogan and other online news networks as #1. So that's really cool, and that's an independent crew. And Anthony Davis, who is Midas Network 5-Minute News, he does This Week. I mean, he does a bunch of different things on that network. He's brilliant, and we love him, and he's a friend of the show, maybe the best friend of the show. And I congratulate him and everybody over there at Midas. Let me see. Sad that Roberta Flack's beautiful voice is silenced. Yeah. The world is somehow a little dimmer without it. Yes, Kim, please tell us. Roberta Flack passed away?
Yeah, she was 88 years old. She died. So that's all I have on that. Passed away. I mean, what else are you gonna say?
I wish they would do obits that way. Roberta Flack died. She was 88. That's it. Back to you. Wow.
Well, she was a big recording artist report. In the 70s. She did Killing Me Softly. That was her.
She did Killing Me Softly. Can anybody else? I mean, I know everybody knows Killing Me Softly. What other song did Roberta Flack have that was a hit? Come on now. What song did Roberta Flack? Don't look at your notes. This is a classic music and 1970s trivia question. We have plenty of older boys and girls who should know the answer to this. Roberta Flack did another song besides Killing Me Softly. Where is the Love? No. The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face? Maybe. Walk on. She did Walk On By. No, that's not what I'm thinking of. She did a duet. And it charted big. Nobody knows. Do you know The Way to San Jose? No, that was not Roberta Flack. First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And she did that, but that's not what I was thinking of. You Are My Heaven, says D. Jones. No. Adam Cohen. Where is Adam Cohen? Put him up. Oh, sorry. The Closer I Get to You. That's exactly right, Adam. Thank you. Well done.
She had something called motor neuron disease, and she was not able to sing anymore.
Oh my God, that's just
motor
brutal.
Neuron disease, MND. She couldn't sing anymore. But yeah, she had a Grammy. She had a lot of hits. She had such a voice.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. That's just so sad. I mean, that reminds me of the Linda Ronstadt situation where, here this person is gifted with this insane instrument, this
And Julie
insane
Andrews
voice,
too. Yeah.
and she's unable to sing any longer. It's
Yeah.
brutal. I mean, and she's still very much alive and able to be active. I mean, imagine that, but just like not being able to use your one superpower, it strikes me as its own circle of hell. But Roberta Flack, so sad that she is.
She also sang "Feel Like Making Love."
Oh yeah. In fact, "Feel Like Making Love" is a much bigger hit.
And apparently the man she made that song with fell to his death from a hotel room in Manhattan. And it was quite a story then. So,
jeez, is that right? Gosh. Kim with a sad and riveting detail of
What?
I know. I don't know what that was. What do you mean he fell to his death?
He fell to his death. It was a big thing. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention back then. What was that? Sometime
Kim,
in the 70s?
with the kind of incomplete reports today.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You're welcome.
Roberta Flack, dead at 88. Back to you.
Back to you. That's all we have on that.
That song she wrote about that guy, he died.
He died.
Fell out of a balcony or
death.
something. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Gosh. Usually our chat comes through with a lot of details that we need. We haven't yet seen that here, but boy, that's really, that's brutal. Well, I'm having some Coachella Valley coffee. You can have it too. It's the
Where's
best
the sound
coffee
effect?
on earth.
It's a little bit of heaven in your cup. What are you drinking in the cup today? What do you have?
I am. This is the Ocotillo espresso, which I like so much. It was
like that
Donny
one a lot.
Hathaway who died that way. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Donny, that's correct, Kim.
Well, I didn't give the name. I didn't think anybody would know who he was. But yeah.
How are you?
I mean, it's Donny Hathaway was who she did the
duet
with
him.
him. Yeah, he
that's
did
right.
the duet with her.
That's correct.
All right. I mean, I don't know.
I blame you.
All right. Maybe it's my fault, but I'm just saying that might have been because he's
from
famous.
a Manhattan hotel. He
wasn't just some guy.
A goner. I said she's the one he sang the duet with.
I didn't hear that. I was too busy screaming at somebody, probably.
Too busy berating me before you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lord.
Who are you talking about? I've just joined the podcast. I always have to keep that in mind. It says G.J. Thomas. Roberta Flack has passed away.
The Pope's doing a little better.
Is he? Pope is rallying.
Pope is doing a little. As a matter of fact, he's working in the hospital a little bit, calling the Catholic Church in Gaza. So he has major kidney issues. Yeah, he's in critical condition, but doing a a
He's still poping, is what you're telling me, even though he's in critical condition. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, yes, is our favorite sponsored coffee. We do love it, and I might add. I might just quickly add that you can get discount 10% off on anything on their website. They do have teas and coffees, and it's all hand roasted. They are terrific. Check them out. 10% off when you mention Mark T. I don't mention it. You put it in the. I don't think you could. If you mention it to your device that you're ordering it on, I don't think it's going to do much.
Mention it to your computer.
Put it in there'll be a little thing for the discount code, so you'll put in Mark T, all one word.
Mention it to the code box.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd mention it, but it was anyway. That's it. Well, I hope the Pope feels better soon, and he can get back to full-time poping. And I'm sad to hear that Roberta Flack is done. And this is interesting, has passed away. Yvonne Beach Bonnie says, hi, y'all. R.I.P., the first artist to ever win a Grammy for Record of the Year in 2 consecutive years. Oh, wow. Now, that's really wild. Miss Roberta Flack. Yeah, sad.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, we have Gary Dietrich coming up bottom of the hour. We're going to talk politics. And one of the things we're going to talk about, it's not Trump and, all the stuff that's going on. We'll get to that. We are going to talk about that, but not so much with Gary Dietrich as much as Democratic funders, the major funders of the Democratic Party, are pulling back. Now, why would that be? We'll talk to Gary about that. It makes sense, or might make sense to you when I give you the reasons. And Gary's going to give us the breakdown. He really will give us the political realities of what's happening right now. I do want to say, speaking of pushback, the Eagles, who blew out the Kansas City Chiefs, they were faced with the decision of going to the White House, which is oftentimes what the winning NFL team does after the Super Bowl.
It's supposed to be an honor, right? And celebrating alongside the president and being recognized is a big thing.
Exactly. And so after the parade, it's tradition the Super Bowl champs to go to the White House, and that is what was presented to them. But the Eagles said that they were going to have a team meeting about whether or not they'd actually go to the White House, because it wasn't clear that everybody really wanted to go to the White House. I mean, you may say, oh, Mark, there's a lot of liberals, and they're, no wonder people hate libs. Because this isn't a lib thing. Donald Trump came out. Now, if he had done it good-naturedly, it might be something that you could laugh about. But what he did was he came out and full-throatedly supported the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, so what? Like if it was Biden who was rooting for the Chiefs, he might still invite them and he'd make some gracious remarks, or and you can say you want what you want about Biden, like he wouldn't know where he is or blah, 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 blah. But the reality is he was gracious in his remarks. He would go, well, I feel embarrassed that I was rooting for him. That's not Trump, right? Trump not only rooted for the Kansas City Chiefs, the reason articulated was because Patrick Mahomes' wife had been a big supporter of his MAGA agenda and of Trump. So that's the reason he supported the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, very on brand for Trump. So when they put it before the team meeting, the players and the Eagles front office voted, and the vote was a massive no as to accepting an invitation to Washington, D.C. to go visit with the president. And so that's the way it's going to go down. The Eagles making a final decision. They are a no on visiting Donald Trump and having the photo op. Wow.
Yeah, I think the Warriors did that too, Karen. They're not the only team that's done that.
Right. Warriors did it the first time during the first administration. That's exactly the first Trump administration. So,
you imagine Steve Kerr at the White House? No, that's not happening.
I'd like Steve Kerr to be president. He's amazing.
Exactly.
He says the right thing. This is what the Democrats need, or the opposition party. However you want to reconstitute the Democratic Party, maybe they have to look. Republicans reconstituted their party. They weren't even told. They just were like, hey, guess what? You guys are all no longer relevant. We're MAGA now. And it's MAGA Nation, and we're going to put people in charge who are loyal to MAGA Nation. And if you don't support us, we're going to primary you, and we're going to get a MAGA Nation person in. That is a complete takeover of the Republican Party, and it is complete. The Democrats are scrambling. They're looking for a message. They're looking for a coherent way to push back. There are some coherent voices. I still think the best voice for the Democrats, and he could lead a workshop on how to do it, were it not organic. I mean, I think he's just this way, and he speaks so well and cuts through the noise. Bernie Sanders. I was on a TYT on Friday on their power panel thing they do. They call it the power panel. It's politics and all the rest. And one of the panelists was saying the Democrats need younger voices, because we're talking about Chuck Schumer, who was hunched over with his, reading glasses down. And I said, no, it's not a question of young and old. I mean, plenty of old people can cut through this noise and make the point. To me, the best messenger, better even than Pete Buttigieg, who I know everybody rightly identifies as a great voice for the opposition, because he dismantles arguments out of MAGA land and really sheds light on details that are important. The best voice is Bernie Sanders still, and he's no spring chicken. This old guy is great. People got to get away from the ageism associated with this culture. The reality is Bernie Sanders knows how to speak the truth, and the truth is so easily spoken right now. Got a guy in the administration who surrounded himself with billionaires and lobbyists. They're all, and by the way, we could see that train coming down the tracks. And he's given the richest man in the world the keys to the kingdom. I mean, if you can't make political hay of that, there's a problem. I mean, the billionaires have taken over. Now, it may be, as a point of fact, just too late. But you have to message somehow. When I say too late, I just don't know how the Democrats climb back into power. You're going to say, well, it's such a mess. There's no way that the Republicans could continue. You can see all the people being hurt. You can see all these government programs haphazardly dismantled, the decapitation of all of these department heads, and then the way the departments are being dismantled. USAID is literally going away. They're pulling the initials USAID off of the building. I mean, it's now, again, I'll remind you, USAID had a full-blown investigation and regulatory flex against Elon Musk. I mean, it's odd that they would go against USAID because their budget is infinitesimal. So if you were really serious about rooting out fraud and abuse, you wouldn't start at USAID. You'd start where? At the Pentagon. The Pentagon is waste, fraud, and abuse. Yet, what are they doing with the Pentagon budget? Anybody know?
Cutting.
Hegseth says he wants to cut 8% a year, but they're increasing the budget by $100 billion. So you tell me what you're serious about.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I don't know. It's the way we see it. But
The Mark Thompson Show.
Dan Bonbozo, seriously, DEI is still with us. Divisive, extremist, intolerant hires are the signature of Trump, says Luis. Yeah. Dan Bongino is the latest in the magical world of MAGA come to life at the FBI. Just because Luis mentioned it, I will fill out the details. Of course, he's a huge Trump supporter, which is really all that's required to be considered quite seriously these days for positions that are high up in government. President Trump has tapped Dan Bongino, the report reads, a hard-charging Trump supporter and one of America's most popular and prolific conservative commentators, to serve as deputy director of the FBI. By the way, deputy director handles a lot of the day-to-day operations of the FBI, so it's not some ceremonial position like vice president. Doesn't really do much, but in this case, you'd be handling day-to-day operations, so it's a big deal. A top podcaster, former Fox News host, New York City Police Department officer, and 12-year veteran of the Secret Service, Bongino is a close friend of FBI Director Kash Patel. Boy, that's a tough one to get out of your mouth. FBI Director Kash Patel.
Yeah.
Now will serve as his right-hand man at the FBI. Trump made this announcement on Truth Social Friday. It came 3 days after the Senate confirmed Patel's nomination, 49-51. Murkowski of Alaska, Collins of Maine, the only two Republicans to vote against him. That is Patel, that is. The appointment is the latest sign that Trump is committed to aggressively cleaning house at the FBI. Bongino, along with Patel, former public defender and Justice Department lawyer who became a MAGA firebrand, will report to Attorney General Pam Bondi and also to the director of the National Intelligence Agency, Tulsi Gabbard, to uncover threats and safeguard national security. Yeah. It's a, look, the Bongino he's someone who, for example, thinks that the J6 recordings that we saw, the images of people storming the Capitol, et cetera, those were doctored by the FBI. He talked about improper spying on the Trump campaign. He is truly Alex Jones-ish in his style. He's bombastic. He's really, he's a flamethrower. He's a firebrand.
Yeah. Conspiracy theorist. They're all conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, there definitely is a rise of conspiracy theories at the top. So, I mean, all they need is these are Alex Jones adjacent people. Just think of them that way. So, and
The Mark Thompson Show.
I also wanted just to mention that because I think it's a big deal. In fact, Tony, you'll tell me when Gary Dietrich gets here, right? Until then, I wanted to, something else happened late Friday, and it's huge. I noted at the beginning of the show that David K. Johnston had sort of pointed our attention and focus to the generals, because when the generals are replaced, you've really changed an important natural balance of power that exists right now. Well, the generals have been replaced, and these kinds of purges are very common as an authoritarian rises to power. In a sudden coup, you might have the military takeover and you'd have those military loyalists in charge. That's not what happened here, of course. We had an election, and we're going to talk about the legitimacy of that election and some of the details in the second hour. But in any case, Trump, as president, has just replaced everyone at the top with loyalists, and now to the military. This could be a critical detail moving forward. Tony, do you have a wrap package on what happened, or here's a reaction, I think, from, was it Jake Tapper? What did you have here? I forget. Oh, here you go.
As part of President Trump's purge of top military leaders Friday night, he also moved to replace Judge Advocates General, or JAGs, at the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. JAGs are the military's top lawyers. They administer the military code of justice, and perhaps most relevantly, as Biden's former Secretary of the Air Force, Fred Kendall, noted, quote, "These are the generals who have the independent legal authority to tell any military commander that an order from the president or the Secretary of Defense is unlawful and cannot be obeyed," unquote. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth refers to JAGs in his book as jagoffs, saying that JAGs put their own priorities, quote, "in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front line," unquote. During his first term in 2019, President Trump, at the urging of Hegseth from his perch at Fox and others, Trump pardoned several service members facing high-profile war crimes allegations against the advice of the top leaders of the Pentagon. But it does not seem enough for President Trump and his team to be able to overrule those in his administration who might enforce guardrails or provide oversight. They don't even seem to want them there to begin with, because Trump's push to squash oversight did not begin with the firing of the JAGs. Among his very first acts as president was to fire 18 inspectors general. These are the independent government watchdogs who provide oversight of cabinet agencies. Why would Trump want to get rid of all of them? 18. He hasn't explained, as he's legally required to do. What would those inspectors general have to say about the ethics and the legality of the mass firings going on? We don't know. They were fired first, including those, according to a New York Times analysis, at 11 federal agencies with more than 32 continuing investigations, pending complaints, or enforcement actions into companies owned by Elon Musk. So what is the response to that from the head of the Office on Governmental Ethics, which monitors financial conflicts of interest across the government? Well, we don't know, because Trump fired him earlier this month. You're starting to sense a theme here. Independence in the Trump administration does not seem to be valued. In fact, it seems to be denigrated. On Tuesday, Trump signed a far-reaching executive order expanding the White House powers over supposedly independent agencies, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Federal Election Commission. These are areas that Congress intended to not be under direct presidential control. Given the compliant nature of the legislative branch, and thus the so-called oversight committees, and yes, Senator Grassley, I remember when you cared about inspectors general, one has to ask, what is the end game here when it comes to this Trump effort to remove watchdogs, to prevent them from doing their jobs? What does he not want you, the American people, what does he want you to not know about what's going on in your government?
Yeah, this is very good. Thank you, Tony. That was really terrific. I mean, I thought that was just a great summary of what happened over the weekend. I've got Gary waiting, and I'll get to him in just a second. And I also, after Gary, or maybe even during the Gary segment, I'll play you a little bit of what's happening with town halls and people speaking out. I think there's a little too much being made of that. Frankly, I think people are, in one case, trying to get their viral moments. And I understand there are a lot of, I don't mean to be, there are a lot of Trump haters or MAGA haters, and I think there's a lot to hate, so don't get me wrong. I just think that there are aspects to a lot of these social media grandstanding moments that are associated with the way you might have an animal rights activist stand up in a restaurant that serves foie gras, let's say, and say, this is an outrage and you should be ashamed or whatever. It gets a lot of attention at the moment, and it also goes viral probably, but I don't know that it helps the cause that much. But you also have to make noise. So I know that that's a balancing act, but I just we'll play a little bit of that in a moment. I think this is a big deal. The politicization of the military is clearly something that has been avoided historically. It's really a third rail. The military should not be politicized, but it is clearly politicized. I mean, everything is politicized now. You have to take a loyalty oath to Donald Trump. There is a loyalty test. The question about, was J6 an FBI conspiracy, an FBI plot? That is one of the questions that is asked of many federal employees that are involved in these agencies if they want to continue. Was the 2020 election legitimate? That is another question that's asked. So these are, right down the middle, sitter loyalty tests that are being offered. And the last thing I'll just mention is that with use of the military, they have the possibility of using that military against American citizens on the streets of America. And this is not, fiction, and it's not even a reach, because Donald Trump has spoken of this before during his first administration, as you know. He wanted the government to open fire on those BLM protesters near the White House. What if we just shot them all in the legs? So you see that there is every bit of the intention not to only politicize the military, but to have the military available in a muscular way for Trump to continue to take power. I think this is part of a much bigger conversation that we will have, and we'll have it with David K. Johnston as well. I'll get into more of these. Let me see if I can see these comments. I've got a little newer configuration here. Regarding the town halls, Depressed Canadian says, this is a $5 super chat. One thing to remember is the harbinger of the Tea Party in 2010 was angry town halls in early 2009. I didn't remember that, so maybe you're right. Maybe we should pay attention to that. Again, my point in the town hall stuff, and you'll see it, we'll play it for you if there's time, was the anger is just part of it. There's a performative aspect to it, the way you'd see people, remember during the mask thing on the planes? I mean, where you felt like, gosh, every flight, there's some a-hole who gets up, doesn't want to put his mask on, gets into a big thing, everybody gets their cameras out, and those moments go viral. It's true that a-hole who gets up in the plane makes a point about masks or makes a point about freedom or liberty, perhaps, but there also is a concocted aspect to it. But maybe it's a concoction that makes a point. So in this case, yeah, this is a viral moment in town halls, but it also makes a point. So, faux angertainment, says Rich. Yeah. Again, though, the party in charge, the GOP, MAGA, whatever you want to call them now, they're big on performative moments. So perhaps, it's all performative moments as far as Donald Trump is concerned. So maybe these are effective. But I'll share some of those specific moments in the town hall as we get to with Gary. Our representatives need to be scared of us, and that's where to start, says Noe Marie Clarity. Thank you for that super chat. In fact, Noe Marie sent me something about getting in touch. There's an app where you can actually get in touch with your legislator. I will get more details on that. I have a note. I wanted to mention it anyway. So if that's your jam, you want to, and by the way, most Democratic legislators are getting, I'm talking about Congress people in the House and the Senate, they're getting overwhelmed with calls. I think we had the statistic on Friday, 1,600 calls a minute. Usually they get 160 calls a day. So Washington is being lit up by the opposition right now. A strong young Democratic voice is Josh Shapiro. Yeah, we're talking about strong voices. And I was saying that, to me, Bernie Sanders still has the strongest voice. He states it bluntly. You've got oligarchical takeover of America. And you can say, oh, there was already oligarchical takeover of America. Yeah, there was, but this makes what existed look like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. This is absolute insane takeover of Washington. And it's not only power, it's dismantling of government. We'll talk more about that and I get it. Many aspects of government could use a facelift, could use even a dismantling, but not every aspect of government, not every agency. The last thing I'll say about this is this BS where Elon Musk sends an email on the weekend, and there is a general email sent to federal workers saying, explain what you've done in the last week to justify your existence. That's a startup move. That's what they do at startups. I know a lot of people in startups, probably many people who are viewers of the show do, because we originated out of San Francisco's Bay Area, which included Silicon Valley. And so we all know people in startups. We all know people who are founders of startups. That's a startup move. They shake up or they shed a lot of staff regardless, without regard to what they do. That is what Musk has done. This isn't a startup, America. This isn't a company that you run like a CEO. But that intimidation tactic and that, whatever it is, strategic tactic where you ask people to justify their existence, it doesn't work here. It's not the same. Musk, for all of his brilliance, and he's sort of viewed as this wunderkind, he's really limited. He knows nothing about government. The Doge people know absolutely nothing about government. The idea that they are weeding out inefficiencies in government, it's laughable. They don't know anything about government. These people who are with Elon Musk have never been in a government building in their lives. So this is, and the last thing I'll say, I was going to say this is a real danger, but the last thing I'll say is just on this particular Musk thing, and then I'll get to Gary. Even at the FBI, Kash Patel, whose blood runs MAGA red, said, do not respond to this request from Elon Musk. This, I need to know within 48 hours what you did last week. 5 things you did last week at your agency or whatever. I mean, and Patel wasn't the only one. There were others in the intelligence community who said, no, do not respond to this. And in that memo sent by Musk, there was the demand, do respond to this within 48 hours, or we will consider this your resignation. This is the crap that's going on in Washington. And you've got Elon Musk, an unofficial functionary of Donald Trump, who is turning Washington on its head. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And the GOP should be ashamed. And if they were capable of shame, they would be ashamed. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right. Rant over. Thanks for being here. And you can smash the like button. That helps us in the world of YouTube. I know. I don't really understand how it works either, but it really does help. So smash it with
your iron rod.
Yeah, smash it like a boss. This guy is, don't forget to click on the thumbs up button. Yes, the same thing. Thank you, Judy W., for mentioning that to people. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Again, that helps us. It's all free. We appreciate it and love to see our audience and footprint grow. This guy is a brilliant analyst for politics when it comes to, I'm just thinking about Gary Dietrich's career. I mean, he's a longtime colleague at KGO Radio, across the CBS television stations now, on iHeart Radio. He is their political analyst, and he joins us on Mondays to try to make sense of the nonsensical. Here he is, Gary Dietrich, everybody. Hello, sir.
We might have just lost him.
Oh, we did? Great.
After
that big intro? Gee.
I know.
That was tough. Well,
you probably just got a call like last time.
Here's a question for Gary. Please ask Gary if he can honestly say that this administration is not actively laying the groundwork for a dictatorship. So we think that you, Gary, get a call, and when you get a call, it knocks you off of the feed. That's what Tony's theory is. But however you get to us, we don't care. There he is, Gary Dietrich, you handsome fool. Good to see you. Gary, I'm getting this. I want to talk about the Democrats and how big funders are stepping away from the Democrats. So we'll get to that in a second. But this from James Watson: please ask Gary Dietrich if he can honestly say that this administration is not actively laying the groundwork for a dictatorship. We're worried about a dictatorship, Gary. Talk us off the ledge.
Well, I saw Jake Tapper got a very long segment of the show. Hey, Jake seems to be one of the guys that's going to survive the media shakeout. Did you hear today Lester Holt is stepping down at NBC? Of course, Norah O'Donnell on my network at CBS has stepped aside as anchor. Chuck Todd on NBC in the Sunday mornings. Quite the shakeup going on. Jake seems to be firmly ensconced. Good for him. Hey, I think the best way I can respond to this question, Mark, is to take off of your lead-in. I thought what was most interesting to me about the weekend, and you kind of alluded to it when it came to Kash Patel, but the Musk request that everybody submit, hey, what'd you do last week other than feed your dog at home? Check out the breadth of the resistance to that. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, told her people, pause, stand down, don't do it. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, said the same thing. Hegseth, DOD, Department of Defense, said the same thing. So, it has been broad-based. The number of Trump recent confirmed appointees who said, thanks for coming, but no thanks. I'm telling my people, don't do this. So I thought that was quite profound, actually, because when you have that level of resistance of Trump's own cabinet secretaries, I think this email from Elon, to your point, Mark, was kind of look, I grew up in Silicon Valley, right? It was a Silicon Valley startup. Hey, some, CEOs are notorious in Silicon Valley. 2:30 on a Friday night after a few drinks, they get an idea, out comes the email, and by 6:30 the next morning, I want a new strategy for this company, right? So I'm just guessing that the traction on that thing is not very strong.
Yeah, this is interesting. Right, it's a startup move. If you're just joining us, that is a classic startup move. Gary characterizes it so beautifully. The idea somehow that these kind of Habsburgian kings who are CEOs of these various companies come in and they go, all right, I want everybody to draft a memo as to what the hell they did today. Otherwise, you're fired. That's the kind of crap that they do. It really is. Look, maybe it works for them as a startup, but America isn't a startup. Anyway, Elon getting pushback, and that's interesting. What you're focusing on is sort of what might be a kind of fissure in MAGA Nation. You're saying that you've got the Muskians, and obviously he's got Trump's ear, but you also have now the heads of these departments. Ultimately, whatever Trump wants, which is likely, I would think, he would side with Elon because he seems to be completely in the thrall of Elon, that would carry the day. But you're saying that's not clear.
Well, I think we should start having the cabinet meetings for the people that have to do the work, man. Rubio's already been sent on a high-level diplomatic mission to Saudi Arabia, right, to deal with the Russia-Ukraine thing. You got Hegseth down at the border and doing things every day. I'm just simply saying, Kash Patel, he's a rock star in the MAGA movement. He said, nah, I don't think my people will be doing that, but thanks for asking. I just think you look around that cabinet room, how many people have raised their hand and say, yeah, I'm all into that? So far, nobody, okay? And so nobody of high-profile stature like I just mentioned. So I know we want to get on to other topics, but that's my take on the world of Trump and MAGA and Musk over the weekend. Okay.
Now I want to ask about Democratic money. Why wouldn't the Democratic money, the big donors to the Democratic Party, be leaning in heavily with their checkbooks and with an agenda? They aren't. They're doing just the opposite. They're pulling back from the Democratic Party. These are major funders. What's happening?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tie this together with something you also said in the lead-in, Mark, and that was the number of phone calls coming into Capitol offices on both the Senate and the House side has been unbelievable. And if people aren't aware of this, most of those are angry. And they're not just angry at Donald Trump. They're angry at their own representatives in the House and the Senate, saying they're not doing enough. They have the wrong strategy. So there is clearly still, Mark, a huge reservoir of angst left over from 2024. Something many of the major donors are still very upset about, and they've made this clear. And if you want to read it, folks, The Hill, which is a pretty solid, reporter of things objectively when it comes to Congress, check it out. There's a piece on Democratic donors, both large and small. And one of the things they've said, Mark, is very clear. Look, they even used the term in the Hill, hoodwinked, right? We felt hoodwinked in 2024. You told us a year ago we were pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the Biden campaign. You said he was okay. We all learned at the end of June he wasn't okay. They were upset about that. And then the second big gripe they have was, and then you rolled out a 2016 playbook to defeat Donald Trump that clearly was behind the times. You didn't use social media. You didn't get on podcast networks. You relied on old school door knocking instead of more modern techniques to reach voters. And they're upset about that. Now, here's the saving grace. Mark, I know you always like to want to try to bring a silver lining to things, okay? So here's for Democrats. If you want a ray of hope politically, can I offer that up today, Mark?
Please.
Seriously, here's the deal. 21 months from now, we're going to have this thing called the midterm election. Why is that so important? Because Democrats have the opportunity now to micro-target their politics. In other words, yes, they're upset about Trump. Yes, they were upset about Biden. Yes, they're already looking to Shapiro and Newsom and a whole host of Bashir. And by the way, let me throw in another little parenthetical that's really going to get people's attention in the next few months. And that is, if people haven't heard of it yet, Andrew Cuomo is going to throw his hat almost certainly into the race for New York City mayor in a bid to make a major league comeback politically. Don't be surprised. He's already leading in the polls going into that thing. If he wins that race, I would not be the slightest bit surprised to see his name in the mix in 2028. So instead of focusing on the national level and the presidential level, Democrats are going to have an opportunity to take advantage of historical precedent, which is terribly unkind to the party holding the White House in a midterm election, especially a second midterm election, which Trump's going to be facing in less than 2 years. And remember, Democrats are only going to need, Mark, a half a dozen seats out of 435 to retake control of the House. The Senate does not look very favorable for them. There's several Democratic senators, U.S. senators, that said they're not going to run. The map is not looking really positive for Democrats. But in the House, it is going to be hand-to-hand, district-by-district combat. Even in states like California, where if they pick up 2 or 3 seats, that is the Democrats, they'd only need a few more in the rest of the country to retake control of the House. That is a huge advantage because it doesn't take $1 billion to run a House campaign. It takes maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million. You start spreading that around strategically. That is something Republicans have thought about in the past. Democrats undoubtedly, once they turn the page, get past the angst, are going to look at that and say, we have a real opportunity in 2026.
I want now to ask you about something in California that's happening, and I think it's instructive maybe for the agenda moving forward. There's this high-speed rail project, the train, sort of the imagined super train would be from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I actually feel as though that is a world-class thing that California should have. I mean, I thought it was a laudable goal. Sadly, as so many of these things proceed, it becomes rife with likely corruption, with overspending, with issues that evolve to the point that they just can't get this project in any way to have momentum that would carry it through to conclusion. But here's so it's against that backdrop that I asked this question. The federal funding that does underpin a lot of this may go away, yes?
Yeah, there's a really good chance. I mean, you heard the announcement over the last week, and new Secretary of the Department of Transportation, of course, famously did his press conference in L.A., where he said, look, we're going to investigate this funding deal. And you know what? And here's the challenge right now for the high-speed rail project, the one we're talking about now, running up the center of California. And for Gavin Newsom, the problem is that it is way over budget. It is way over. I mean, it's not missing its targeted timelines. And, building something of that size and scale in a state like California, where you're going to have to run through metro areas, you're going to have to go through a lot of environmental regulations. That is not easily done from the beginning. And so it was exceptionally, in my view, huge political lift from the start, Mark, to get this done. And then you throw COVID in there, and then you have the fact that we started under Jerry Brown, former governor of California. Now it's under Gavin Newsom's watch. He has to be gone by the state constitution mandates in less than 2 years. And I don't hear anything from the candidates of the next governor's race saying, I'm all behind the bullet train. So I think it's going to be really tough.
Well, the bullet train. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Might it happen? Yes, but it might not.
I was just going to say it's been a little bit of a political hot potato because of the frustrations associated with timing, with spending, et cetera. I mean, it's really viewed as, oh, I get it. It's one of those projects that just exist to enrich those associated with it. I mean, this is the criticism you often hear, and they just never really will get this thing done. And now, with the feds pulling out of it, potentially, you really won't get it done. But now, because of Fed money, let's talk about Fed money and relief money that will come to California, Southern California, devastated by the fires. Can you speak to that? And they're still talking about attaching strings to any funds.
Well, I think there's certainly going to be federal funding for Southern California. It's a matter of what kind, how fast, and how broad. Okay. There's something happening, though, and this is just the nature of politics. There's no getting around it. You know, people think it's crass and ridiculous, but there's a very, very significant event coming up, you know, Mark, in 3.5 years in Southern California that the quote unquote, as they like to say at the USOC and the International Olympic Committee, the eyes of the world are going to be on LA when the Olympics return to Los Angeles. Everybody is already talking about that. And believe me, there are people behind the scenes already saying, we can't have the international cameras just rolling up and down the streets of Pacific Palisades and Altadena and stuff saying, geez, nothing has happened in the last 3.5 years to rebuild this city. I truly think that that is going to be a political asset. Having the Olympics in SoCal is going to both because look, that's going to be during Trump. That's going to be the end of his administration. You know he's going to be out here. You know the next governor of California is going to want to be there, and a whole host of other people. All the 28 wannabe candidates are going to be there. So I think that actually, and that's just the nature of politics, is going to provide some significant leverage to get something done in Southern California that were that not there, probably, and were it not the central focus of the entertainment industry and television next to New York City and movies, I think all those things provide leverage points for LA that other places devastated by disasters simply don't have.
That's fascinating because I see those things as potentially burdens, right, to the region, and you see them as assets. And now that you make your point, I see them as potential assets as well. I think you make your point very well. But wow, to scramble for the Olympics is a big scramble. It's a big fiscal burden. And by the same token, as you say, it might be something that the feds want to get behind because it will speak to the support or lack of support they may have. Finally, just because we're in Southern California for this topic, Karen Bass, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, she just fired the fire chief down there. They kind of got into it a little bit with the blame game associated with could there have been more prep on the fires? And clearly that's the route that Bass is taking now in the aftermath, that there could have been more prep. There should have been more in the way of my office, Ms. Mayor Bass's office, being advised as to the threat. She's really playing the I didn't really know how bad it was likely to be card so that she is able to hide behind that on her overseas trip. Speak to what's happening in Mayor Bassland. It feels like, and you'll pardon this, but it does feel like the blame game that you oftentimes see in politics is being played in a heavy way there.
Oh, huge. And, you know, I'm jokingly calling this people now a master class in political survival by Karen Bass and her allies. You know, seriously, I have no doubt that a case study at my alma mater, the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, is going to be written on this entire scenario. And part of that is going to be, friends, here's the 3 ways you avoid political consequences. You mentioned one, Mark, information. Well, I was either misinformed or I didn't get the right information. That was the first storyline, remember, we heard from Karen Bass, was, geez, I went off to Ghana because I didn't really know it was so bad. People saying, wait a minute, all you had to do was turn on any TV news station in LA, the weather every 10 minutes, right? Mark, you live down there. It was shouting that this is going to be a potentially devastating 80 to 120 mile an hour wind event, right? Santa Ana's. You knew that before the fires. I know you did, my friend.
Of course. Well, it was talked about, and the reason I'm not at all sympathetic to Bass is because, as you've said, it was talked about a lot, but it was also talked about as a, once in a generation, if not once in a 100-year period, wind event. And it would be so intense with winds 80 to 100 miles at sea level. That was forecast. And even the window of timing was forecast. It was super accurate, the forecast. Yeah. So I don't see how you dodge that absolute fact that your entire community was aware of it, but you weren't.
So that's one straw man. Information looks like maybe that's not going to succeed. The second thing you go after is resources as a politician. Well, you know what? The feds didn't give us money, or the state didn't, or we didn't have the right number of engines, or whatever it is. And that, of course, has been part of the deal. The famous, now famous empty reservoir. Well, it was the Department of Water or Power in LA that drained that, and we didn't have anything to say about that. And so that's yet to be fully sorted out. Then, of course, the blame that the fire department didn't have enough engines. Now we're told some people saying, oh, they had engines, but they didn't deploy them. So resources, we'll see where that ends up. And finally, of course, the blame falls to someone else, other human beings. And that's why we saw, the famous, end of the week massacre, so to speak, politically, of the fire chief, who was the one who, Mark, popped her head above the fence line first and said, hey, wait a minute, don't blame us. You guys at City Hall were the ones that caused this. So what happens? She's been replaced. She's been fired. We need, quote unquote, the euphemism is always the same. We need, quote unquote, new leadership in the fire department, Mayor Bassett. Mark, I don't know if any of this stuff's going to fly, but that is a master class in political responsibility avoidance. I have a feeling that this is not going away soon, however.
Well, that's certainly true. And I said on the radio in Los Angeles, I said I'd be very surprised if she can survive this. I just don't see any way she can survive it. She can throw everything that Gary just said at the wall. Nothing's going to stick because this was just too devastating and too well advertised as potentially devastating prior to her leaving town. So again, there is you make such a good argument for how she's followed the playbook, but I think she's losing the game, regardless of what plays are called. Look, I love the time you spend with us, and you always bring a healthy perspective to so many of these issues. We're really grateful to you. And as we, knock over 100,000 subscribers on this channel and increase its footprint, I think your voice becomes all the more important. So thank you, Gary Dietrich.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great rest of your show.
All right. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Right on. And Gary Dietrich is sponsored. That's right. His segment is sponsored by Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional. Bill Campbell of Remax Gold is your guy. You can call or text Bill, 530-448-7474. Again, Bill Campbell, Remax Gold in Northern California. You may be leaving. You may be coming. You may be thinking. Whatever your situation around the real estate world, Bill Campbell, great source for you at Remax Gold. Call or text him 530-448-7474. And thanks to Gary Dietrich.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh my gosh. You'll tell me if I've got to catch up on some comments. I'm looking. I thought we answered that question. Greg says the Tea Party template is exactly what progressives need to do. Name just one GOP criminal who has honored the Lincoln Douglas legacy. Yeah, I mean, this is a different time in America. I don't know that people are even, they've rallied support around certain issues, right? The wedge issues are immigration, and I'd suggest the trans world and the world of wokeness. That's what DEI is also. You can put that all together. Maybe you just want to call it DEI and leave the trans out, but LGBTQ plus community is definitely affected by all of this. I don't think the Democrats do themselves any favors by mentioning DEI. I think DEI has a radioactivity about it now that doesn't, I'm talking about political radioactivity. I'm not saying, this is not an evaluation of whether or not these are legitimate issues to be considered in America. I think they are. But I am just talking about the brute, ruthless politics of the moment. And I think DEI does them no favors. Our only hope is inertia in the bureaucracies. Yeah. I don't know. That's a sad hope. I mean, there is depressed Canadian. Thank you for that. I would say this, and this speaks to, I think, this political moment as well. The Democrats, there's an aspect of kind of waiting around, which is why they're losing some of their big funders. Like, can't everybody see how awful this is? We'll regain power just on the pendulum swing. The idea somehow that this is so terrible that people will definitely swing back over to the Democrats. And while I think there may be an aspect of truth to that, I'm very concerned about future elections. I love this talk about midterms and he's going to be out in 2028. I'm not convinced that that's true at all. Is there any aspect of Elon Musk or Donald Trump or MAGA's disposition that seems at all adherent to existing constitutional structure? I'd say no. The only shred of that might be respect for the courts in the short term. But we're going to talk more about that as the week goes on. I've got of course, we've got David Katz, the brilliant legal analyst, coming in on Thursday. I have Corey Brett Schneider, who's an incredible constitutional lawyer, who's also on the docket as well. We have some great guests ahead, and I caution you, because I think we can, again, get too hopeful about the midterms. I just want to make sure the midterms happen, and I think that would be something to focus on. And I do believe that there is a way that obviously we can regain some control of government if the midterms, if we see them prevail, if we see the Democrats prevail. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here because this, for some reason, is not all right. Oh, my God. This is a new setup, and I wanted to mention what's happening in Germany. This Friedrich Merz guy, he's a leader of the Christian Democrats. They're a conservative party, but there are 2 points. First of all, he's now the new leader of Germany, and he is, even though they call him a conservative leader, and he is that, the kind of conservatism isn't like the alt-right conservatism that we are used to talking about in this country. It's a center-right Christian Democratic Union, and he is 63 years old. He's, again, another jillionaire, right? Didn't he make a fortune in the private sector? And now this business acumen that he supposedly is bringing to German office is something that the German people really spark to, because the German economy has stagnated. So now, 69 years old, I see. And he is the new leader of Germany, and more to the point, as far as the Americans are concerned, he said, we're having to pull away from America. America, it's clear, has changed their disposition toward Europe. America has changed its disposition toward Russia, and we need to think in terms of existing without America, taking care of European interests, which don't always line up, it would seem, with American interests, particularly given the new administration. So this is something that he's made no qualms about. And so he says, bringing stronger leadership to Europe. And now in this new age of anxiety in Europe because of Trump, the Christian Democrats will lead Germany. Now, I wanted to...
It used to be, Mark, that part of the mission of the United States was to lift up democracies around the world and to make sure that democracy could succeed. But the Friedrich Merz says that now it appears the Trump administration is largely indifferent to the fate of Europe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think that Trump sees the European future as in any way relevant. It's a remarkable thing to say, but I really do believe that's true. I saw that, because this administration, the new administration, is in love with crypto. He was not in love with crypto, and called it a scam. Even those high up in his administration called crypto a scam, and now they're all in for crypto, right? In fact, Trump has a coin, Melania has a coin, and they even have a czar of crypto, David Sachs. Yeah. And this is all just it's a grab. It's a money grab. But hours after Coinbase said the SEC was dropping a lawsuit against Coinbase, another major cryptocurrency exchange had a record-setting theft. It was a giant hack. I just want to mention this to you because this is the new administration, the new America. We're all about crypto. Coinbase, the largest crypto marketplace in the U.S., reached a deal with U.S. regulators, and all those regulators are, of course, going away, to dismiss a lawsuit that had hung over the crypto industry for years, but within hours after settling that lawsuit, just 2 hours later, Bybit, which is another leading crypto exchange, said it had been hacked. Industry analysts estimating the loss at $1.5 billion, the largest theft in crypto history. The prices of Bitcoin, Ether, and other major cryptocurrencies plunged. Even Coinbase's share price dropped 8% by the end of the day. Of course, Coinbase is that platform on which you trade cryptocurrencies, like Charles Schwab or something of the crypto world. So this is an illustration of the state of crypto in 2025. Even as President Trump embraces this industry, it is the Wild West, and it is very vulnerable to hacks. And so I would say proceed with caution, although in Washington, they are going to encourage millions of investors to dabble in crypto for the first time. So you've got the president and his hench people who are all speed ahead on crypto because they're all making so much money from crypto. I just mentioned their coins, their meme coins, and the way you can manipulate this market so aggressively that it is certainly not like playing any kind of other currency exchange.
Did you notice that on PayPal, they really push crypto? Like they want you to dabble and invest in crypto. They have a whole
I didn't notice that. Is that right?
Yeah, they have a whole list of all the crypto things, all the different types of crypto you can invest in. Yeah, they make it really easy for you to play around in that kind of stuff.
No, wow. I have some crypto. Just because it's a long story, but I haven't. The reason I mention it in the context of what you just said is it's actually hard. You got to get a wallet, like one of these special wallets, and then there's a code, and then there's another security phrase, and then you have to get you don't keep that security phrase on your computer. You keep that security phrase in another maybe security phrase wallet. It was way complicated, and I want to liquidate it. And I've wanted to liquidate it for a long time, but I don't even know how to. It's so hard with the security phrases and the wallets. Like, I don't know. I want out of the whole thing. But it'll be the undoing for so many. It's just a kind of a gambler's arbitrage. I don't know what it's about. A depressed Canadian says people talk about needing a younger voice for the Democrats or a liberal Joe Rogan, but the Dems need their own Mitch McConnell. After Obama's huge win in 2008, he obstructed much of Obama's agenda. The Dems need to be ruthless, says depressed Canadian. Thank you for the $20 super chat. I fully agree with that. You know, I've said it a lot. I think your obstruction is limited. I know you're the minority party, Democrats, but even in the minority, you can do a lot. And you certainly can get voices to speak out against so much of what's going on. I mean, this is such a brutal period in America. I'm surprised there isn't more. And I'm surprised there isn't a coalition of voices. But that may be coming, to be fair. I do want to mention what's happening at the national parks, because 1,000 full-time employees have been cut, and the fate of thousands of other seasonal workers is unclear. Tours are being canceled, and literally there's a question as to who's going to empty the trash. We have a conversation with Belinda Weymouth, who's our eco-journalist, and she talks about this. You can find that video on our channel. But 1,000 permanent National Park Service employees were dismissed suddenly, and 3,000 additional people fired from the U.S. Forest Service. That work in concert, those people do, with the parks. Thousands more seasonal workers questioning if they would have jobs. There's a memo from the U.S. Department of the Interior overseeing the national parks approving 7,700 temporary positions. The park, though, a little bit in doubt. When we talk, by the way, I think I'm wearing the Grand Canyon T-shirt, which I got at the Grand Canyon, just coincidentally. And this is part of the push of visitors that will come during spring break and summer.
I was reading that park officials are saying you're not going to have the same experience this year. It's going to be a lot different. We don't have the people. It's
such a wonderful aspect of America, the national parks. And look, sadly, you know where I am, I come with a bias, but I try to be fair. Look, if this guy was doing things that would buff up the national parks or buff up our disposition toward a lot of corporate and chemical dumping that is going on, I mean, corporate polluters, I would say, gosh, you got to give Trump credit. I mean, but that's not what's happening. I mean, this is sadly
we
the
gave him
undoing
credit
of the National Park Service.
When he put money toward the COVID vaccine. Remember, we gave credit then.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, Kim is so right. We celebrated that Trump, pushed back and he got this Operation Warp Speed or whatever going. And then he, you couldn't find him near the vaccine.
No.
I think you could, but he didn't want to admit that he was leaning toward the vaccine anyway, because he saw so much of MAGA Nation leaning away, and led by the Rogans and also anti-vaxxers, and of course his new HHS secretary, RFK Jr. Smokey Bear got fired. Love to Bud says, yeah, really sad when you put it that way. Yeah. And here is Luis saying, who will ascend to the presidency? Who ascends to the presidency if DT has the fatal cheeseburger-induced heart attack? Elon or Vance? Is Vance even still around? Hashtag JD Milcarton. Well, let me just say this, Luis. It's I know you're kind of being funny, and you are funny, and you're one of the guys who comes in with some stuff that makes us smile, and this is one of them, I think, with the fatal cheeseburger-induced heart attack. But it would have to be, just as a practical matter, it can't be Elon Musk, because Elon Musk could never be president. He wasn't born in this country. So that's, that's if they respect that aspect of the Constitution. Maybe they don't. Also cleaning up some other comments. We read your comments here. CC Ryder says, I don't believe Biden has dementia. I think he was exhausted and was never trained to debate a master gaslighter. That's certainly true. Got frazzled, stuttering kicked in. If Biden had dementia, he would fumble on the teleprompter. I also don't believe he has full-blown, like, I don't know where I am, dementia. Obviously, that is true. But he was ill-equipped, CC Ryder, I would say, for the job of campaigning. He really was. He was so given to gaffes. He was a gaffe master already, Biden was. But his infirmity was an awful thing to have on the trail. You have one guy who's screaming, who's full of this bilious rage, this this vituperative rhetoric, this angry blowtorchy crap. And then you have the other guy who's, speaking meekly because he's an old man.
Sure.
He's not like a Bernie Sanders old man. He's like a more traditional old man. And he was unable to, he was just diminished by the years. And so Biden was not up to it. He was not equipped with what you need to really campaign and win the presidency. I think on some level, Democrats had to face that. And there'll be many books written about this, and what we're reading is that, Biden was not wanting to let go of office. It's a really hard thing to let go of, especially when you feel as though you've had a successful presidency. I get this transformative bill through, the not only Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill. This bill had so much associated with it that was transformative, that is transformative. And many who voted against it in red districts are taking credit for all the money that's coming into their district based on that bill. And getting it passed was a big deal. If you're Joe Biden, you're thinking, hey, I did this, and I defeated this guy once before. I'm full speed ahead on beating him again. And I don't think you know how diminished you are. I think you're in denial. The last thing I'll say about this, and I mentioned this a while ago, my dad passed away in June of last year. And my dad was brilliant, okay? My dad was an utterly brilliant man. I mean, he's an insanely literate, an incredible both scholar, teacher, and, was oftentimes remarked upon by guys who were award-winning intellects themselves as like the smartest person they'd ever met. I mention this for a reason. Because in the last year of his life, my father was diminished. He was hit by COVID, and he came out of the COVID thing. He was still sharp. He's 94 years old. Guy was sharp, as you can imagine. And then COVID hit, and he was diminished. And he was still wonderful, and he was still interesting to speak with, but he couldn't in any way approach the kind of intellect that he brought to many issues. So I asked him one night, we were sitting there, and I said, hey, Dad, do you think you've lost a step, through the years, or even as a result of the hospital stay with COVID? Do you think just is it harder for you to keep up? It was clear, manifestly obvious to us that he'd lost a bunch, maybe 40% of this incredible horsepower that he had intellectually. And he said, I don't see it. He said, maybe, he said, I definitely would accept it if you told me that that's true. But he said, I don't feel that. That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't feel it. Joe Biden didn't realize, I think, how diminished he was. See the first points I made. He saw himself as an accomplished politician who'd beaten this guy once. And that's, I think you can say, unforgivable. But you can also say, and that's the reason I tell you the story about my dad, you can also say that's human nature. So that's the word on Joe Biden. I won't discuss it again. I've kind of mentioned it once before, but I do think that that was what was going on with Joe Biden. And make no mistake, Democrats at the highest levels around Joe Biden were complicit in not really giving him the come to Jesus speech prior. They let him fall on his face in front of the nation in that debate, and there was a coronation in effect for Harris, and that didn't help either. And as effectively as she ran her campaign, it was a throw-together job, and it wasn't effective enough, and it didn't focus on the issues that likely would have carried the day. But I don't think this last election went off on issues. I don't. I think Trump is a charismatic candidate, and then, as we'll talk about next, I think that there was a less than legitimate way in which election results were processed. I'll just leave it at that. So we'll talk to Jessica Denson next. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. I'm so excited to speak to this person who is someone who I think has done the heavy lifting associated with asking questions about the last election. You know, we had Greg Palast on, and he continues to be a good friend of the show. Greg Palast talks about voter suppression. I think he shows the math and has shown the math in regard to the last presidential election about voter suppression and essentially the ways in which so many votes were shed from the voter rolls. But when it comes to the last election, there was more than just voter suppression, quite potentially, and I think quite probably. So in this election that Trump carried all the swing states in, you, I think, can reasonably ask some questions with the involvement of Elon Musk and the aggressive way in which these guys have taken power, and they've taken power away from investigative agencies. You can ask questions about how these, how the election was processed and how the count was processed. And so those questions are being answered and asked by our next guest, Jessica Denson, everyone. Yeah.
I'm happy to be back with you, Mark.
You really have done it. I mean, you went to Washington in the bitter cold, and you know, I feel like you've been a cry in the night. I don't know how many people are hearing your cry. I first would ask you to reiterate sort of the overall position that you've taken on the election, then speak to whether or not you feel there's any momentum around the conversation right now.
Well, first, can I make an announcement, and then we'll get to that?
Sure.
The last time you had me on, we were talking about 14th Now, and we are doing 14th Now 2.0 in DC on March 14th. So we are continuing this movement. This is a constitutionally based movement. I and many of our organizers do not believe that the results of this election were legitimate for reasons I'm more than happy to discuss with you.
So, explain why it's called 14th Now, if you would.
Well, sure. It's called 14th Now. I mean, that was kind of the birth of our movement. I reported extensively on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment on lights on leading up to Donald Trump's illegal swearing in violation of Section 3. Section 3 is, of course, the article of the 14th Amendment that says insurrectionists cannot hold office. And the Trump v. Anderson ruling never took away that disqualification. He is currently, right now, at this moment, an illegitimate president. So our whole movement was predicated on Section 3. We tried to pressure Congress to reject his electors. And God knows, Mark, they knew we were there. They knew we were there. We had not a massive showing of people, but we had people on the phones. We were in the halls of Congress. We had a 3-day event on the Lincoln Memorial. They knew we were there. Every single one of those lawmakers across the aisle violated their oath on January 6th by certifying his election in violation of the Constitution. So you and so many of us knew what we were in for. We knew this horror show that we were in for, that we're living right now. We have a Constitution to protect us from it. We are supposed to be using that Constitution. And so there's been such a beautiful burgeoning protest movement with 5051, with other groups that are just, popping up everywhere, protesting Elon Musk, protesting Tesla, protesting at their state capitals, protesting all over the country. And so we thought, do we need to do this again? Was 14th now just a warm up? And we really do feel like we have to do this again. And I would say what distinguishes 14th now is that we need immediate action. We don't think we can live through 4 years of this. We should be normalizing the conversation about Donald Trump's impeachment and removal yesterday. Any constitutional lever, and there are others. Impeachment and removal is not the only one. So we are having a second massive event with the affiliation of 5051 and other groups on March 14th in Washington, D.C. And we would love the masses to come and join us. We're this time doing our best to mobilize buses and other transportation to get people there from other parts of the country if they can't get there on their own. But this is a day that we really think we need to get to D.C., take our stand, claim the power that the Constitution bestows on us, we the people, and demand that action be taken now. So it's at nowmarch.org. Thank you so much. You've got it up on the screen there, nowmarch.org. And we are doing this again on March 14th in Washington, D.C.
So now to the question that I was just noting, which is that, the conversation around this issue has continued. And, you were early to the party, which I really love. And I think we were sort of on the early side of the party also, with questions about the election. I wanted to, though, get to whether or not you feel, it sounds as though, implied anyway, you feel as though there is more of a conversation around this than there was before.
I think there definitely is. Now, one of the groups that we platformed on Lights On is called Election Truth Alliance. And they are just a grassroots group of data analysts. These are not partisan people. These are people that looked at the data coming in from places like Clark County and saw that something was way off. I mean, if you're familiar with their work, they've done analyses of the distribution of the data coming in from the tabulators on early voting days. And when you show it on a graph, what appears is what looks like what's been dubbed a Russian tail. And the reason it's been dubbed a Russian tail is because in the 2020 constitutional referendum in Russia, there is the same kind of phenomenon occurs, where you see it kind of progressing like a normal bell curve, and then it just goes off in this non-organic pattern. And that is an indication, they believe, of manipulation. They've seen this in more than one place. They've
seen it in a lot of these swing districts and swing states.
Yes.
And I did look at that graph as well. And what you saw, what Jessica's describing is, and it's tough. And it's funny. I was going to post the graph, and I should have sent it to you, Tony. But essentially, you've got it's not important. There wasn't much to the graph except to say that you could visually see the way in which, when you say the returns were coming in as expected, meaning, with and then all of a sudden there is a surge where it's just Trump. It's like, it's just so extraordinary. It so defies any kind of history that one would think, just how does that happen in swing state after swing state? It's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, and Mark, I mean, it's almost like those who are not having this conversation are just denying things that have been said out of the horse's mouth about this election. Donald Trump said leading up to this election, I don't need your votes. He said that repeatedly. I don't need your votes. He said the night before his illegal inauguration, Elon Musk knows those vote counting computers better than anyone. There are interviews with Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson with that little kid, that poor little kid who is God Almighty, what is going to become of that child, sitting on his lap saying, basically confessing that they have the election fixed and know how to hack things. I mean, they're saying this in broad daylight. And then on top of that, we have this data, the indication from the data. We have bomb threats, hundreds of bomb threats on election day in Democratic precincts. We have so many indications. I finally had Greg Palast on my show last week, and I really believe that it wasn't just a one. They didn't just come at this election with one attack. It was a multi-pronged attack, and the voter suppression, of course, is undeniable, and that's millions of votes that could have put Kamala Harris over the edge. But you also, I think, have to, this is the thing. People are talking about midterms. I think, Mark, we're kind of fooling ourselves. If we think we're going to have a legitimate midterm, Donald Trump has also just recently made comments about being able to fix this midterm and having some secret plan. To think that we can get to a midterm and have a legitimate election that's not manipulated without reckoning with what happened in 2024 is, I think,
well, I agree with you completely. I don't. That's why we're here. We're going to get them in the midterms. We're going to get them in the general, the next general. Yeah. I don't. I think first of all, there's so many ways in which Trump could prevent the next general election from happening. Yes. And I get it. There are probably people walking in, please, Mark, are you kidding? We always heard about this, etc. But I think there is an aggressive move to put in so many loyalists that you don't really have any guardrails in place. Now, the one thing I will say about elections in this country is that they are run by states. So the arm of the federal government is not supposed to be in those elections state by state. Right. That said, there are ways that they can, for example, say that the threat to the poll workers or the threat to the elections of purity and legitimacy is so intense that we need to put federal troops around these various, or we need they've just deputized a bunch of people to be sort of Muskian and
Elon Musk security now can carry weapons on federal property.
Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And so I said it when he pardoned the Proud Boys and pardoned all of those J6ers. I said, this is his militia. And you can say, well, please, what is it? What are they going to? Well, they can do things like say, we're going to deputize you just as we have these Muskian security guys, and you now can carry those weapons and you can be assigned to these various polling places. It seems extraordinary, but it's really not even a day's drive from where we are. CC Ryder says this, though. I want you to be able to take on some of these. CC Ryder says, everyone needs to watch Biden's cyber director, Jen Easterly, interview with the Washington Post on election security landscape in the 2024 contest on YouTube. She also posted a report on the CISA website. No cyber fraud is what she's saying. That's Biden's cyber director, Jen Easterly. Can you speak to that?
I would wish I could. I'll have to look up that video. That said, I will say that what I have seen, and even what I have seen from other left-leaning or so-called pro-democracy, spaces on YouTube and the podcast space, is they will have a conversation that that takes some conspiracy theory out there. For instance, very early on, they would say, there was the 15 million vote thing. Okay, we got past that. We know it wasn't a 15 million vote margin. They will take something, almost have like a straw man counter to a lot of the evidence we've seen. So I don't know about that specific report or discussion. I'll have to look into it. One thing I can say is that one of the people we've had on Lights On is Susan Greenhalgh from Free Speech for People. Now, she is an election security expert. She works with Alex Halderman. She has worked with him in the past, one of the preeminent hackers, cybersecurity people in this country, who is cited in Kamala Harris's book, by the way. And she writes in her book, The Truths We Hold, about how easy it is to hack elections. This is in Kamala Harris's own words. So Susan Greenhalgh worked with Alex Halderman, cited by Kamala Harris, talked to us on Lights On about the CISA statements, how the CISA statements, the security administration that's overseeing supposedly election security, are not comprehensive. It is her life's work to see where the holes are and where the checks are not being made. And so I think there is a really unfortunate effort by those in the the so-called democratic or pro-democracy space to say, oh no, everything's good here as a result of Donald Trump's caricature of election integrity in 2020. And if you look at it in that way and you see what they did in 2020, they made such a spectacle of election integrity and voter integrity, which actually is a real issue at the end of the day, securing elections, that we could never discuss this legitimately again. And that's a really dangerous place to be. Every healthy democracy conducts rigorous audits, checks, things to make sure there was no manipulation. Romania, Georgia, these countries seem to understand that you have to take action when Russia interferes in your election. But here, my God, in the United States, we've just got a Russian asset sitting in the White House, and we couldn't even double check to make sure the guy didn't cheat to get himself in there.
There is a fat and happy way in which Americans proceed. We kind of take our democracy for granted. I think that will be a thing of the past given the next couple of years, but it really has led us to this place where we got to go, well, it's legitimate. I mean, it's amazing. Trump tapped into this and that and American grievance, and there may be considerable truth to that. I mean, it certainly was a tight race, and you can, again, Kamala Harris, I think, was a flawed candidate, but under the circumstances, I mean, there was a rising despot who was clearly about to take office. But that said, I mean, he did tap into whatever. But I think there is this sense that, and I think you so beautifully put it, the idea that you become an election denier was something that became so associated with MAGA. The complete bankruptcy of that insistence. You had Giuliani out there, the My Pillow guy. You just had a cartoonish kind of protest about the 2020 election that Democrats so didn't want to be associated with that kind of pushback that they completely let this stuff go, and they let all questions regarding the election sort of pass. I don't understand why there wouldn't at least be a call for recounts in some of these swing states. Again, I will never understand that. It's not expensive. They could have raised that money in an instant. What they paid for Beyonce to show up at one of her rallies, they could have easily put that money into a recount. I think that at least would have settled some of these issues.
Yeah, something like 60% of the base wanted it. I mean, it's what their base wanted. It's what we wanted. And it's tragic. It is absolutely tragic that it didn't happen when the time remained for them to do that.
Karen says media is being taken over by the right, either in fact or intimidation. It is true. You don't get a lot of media oxygen on these questions. Now, I'm sure there's some there who would say, hey, it's because there's no legitimacy to these questions, but it is, there's enough of a cry about this, there's enough of a drumbeat that you'd think the media would pick up on this.
Yes, Mark, and it is not, sadly, only right-wing media that doesn't pick up on it. And it's not even only MSNBC and CNN that doesn't pick on it. It is those in our space. As those in our space. I literally left my network, my former network, Midas Touch, that bragged last week about ousting Joe Rogan from the, top of the podcast charts. I left their network to be able to have this conversation because they wanted to shut it down 3 days after the election and not touch it with a 10-foot pole. So that is the space that we're living in.
So to that point, do you think, and leaving them out, or including them, it doesn't matter to me, but I just would ask, do you feel as though that's because they worry about the feds coming and shutting them down, or Fed intimidation, or the ways in which they've weaponized the IRS? There are many ways that Washington and the Trump administration, or any administration in power, but certainly this one seems bent on revenge, can weaponize many of the instruments associated with that power to essentially intimidate you from not covering or having these conversations.
I don't know. I mean, if you watch any of their programming, they would tell you that they're willing to, go to the gulag for being critics of Donald Trump. So, I mean, that doesn't match up with what they're telling their audience. I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's an uncomfortable conversation. What I did on Lights On is I confronted the gaslighting out of the gate. I'm like, listen, I know that they are going to put that in that framing, and we have to reject that. We have to reject it immediately and correct it and understand how dangerous that projection and gaslighting is. And this is coming from a projectionist and gaslighter. So let's just handle that right out of the gate and then do our due diligence. I don't know. I mean, when it came, Midas touch, their failure to cover the election anomalies just rolled into a kind of counter narrative on Section 3. And what I kind of saw it as is them wanting to cover their friends in the Democratic establishment. And listen, I am all for uplifting those who are doing our work and are on our side every single day. But if they have an opportunity to do things that they're not doing, they damn well need to be called out. And we are doing a disservice to ourselves, to our party. I'm an independent, but to the party we support, to our audience, to the country, if we are just mindlessly cheering them on when they are not using the levers at their disposal to save us. That is what has gotten us this far. It is what's going to end this republic as we know it if we don't start holding especially our friends accountable.
It's interesting because the Republicans, again, now they've had their party, I'd suggest, completely reconstituted with this MAGA infestation. But the Republicans throw everything at the wall to see what sticks.
I know.
I mean, it's remarkable. Democrats are, well, we had the election. That's what we threw at the wall, and it didn't work out. And sort of, really? I mean, you know, I'll give the Republicans credit. They kick and scream during a legitimate election of Joe Biden. And so much do they kick and scream that it becomes a litmus test for the next administration when they retake power, that if you don't accept that Biden's victory was not legitimate, you can't be in this administration. That is the question that they're asking as a loyalty test to make sure that everybody around Trump is on board. The Democrats, it seems, just are far more tepid in the way they go about these arguments.
Yeah, well, this is how democracy dies, Mark. I mean, I don't know. That's why we have to be, that's why we're doing 314. That's why we're doing this. And I really hope that everybody, I've been doing everything I can on Lights On to normalize the conversation. Like, they throw crimes at the wall to burn things down. Can't we throw the Constitution at the wall and every legal opportunity and mechanism we have at the wall? I mean, I had a guest on last week who was one of our speakers back in January. She's a columnist for Huffington Post and other outlets. And she proposed a way that we can still use Section 3 by declaring an internal coup that is going on right now with Elon Musk and Donald Trump in our federal government. This is an internal coup. This is not normal. This is not constitutional. This is completely lawless. Our Democratic representatives could be normalizing still the conversation about Donald Trump's disqualification and demanding an amnesty vote, because without that, without a 2/3 vote to clear him, he remains disqualified. So there are so many tools. Impeachment is one. Section 3 is another. There are tools right here at our disposal to use, and we have to demand that they use them. We absolutely have to demand that they use them. Throw every legal mechanism at the wall. Take a page out of their playbook, for God's sakes, but for the salvation of our country, for truth, for freedom, for once.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, and we got to wrap up in another minute or so, but if Trump's numbers were lower than Harris's popular vote, this would make sense of why Trump allows Musk to do what he's doing. I think he wants total control of government and power without regard to any of the regulatory and protective mechanisms that are associated with that power. So that's why he got rid of all those, the inspector generals to start, yes, and then the actual generals to finish. We just saw it. So these are all ways in which his power can be balanced, in effect. And of course, he's populated his entire administration with loyalists who all answer that question in the affirmative. That's to say, the election was stolen from you, Mr. President, and we're glad you're back in power. Musk is purging Democrats, says Go See Cali. And how is impeachment possible at this point? The numbers aren't there. Of course, that's true, but the impeachment conversation you can have. And I also feel as though, last thing, just to revisit sort of the central thesis, the idea somehow is that Colorado did adjudicate the fact that Trump, this is a question of whether he was going to appear on the ballot or not.
Right.
Trump was involved in the insurrection around J6. And you can pick it up from there. But what I was trying to make clear is that this isn't just pie in the sky. No. This is, if you look at the adjudicated result of a court case, you see that you do have something to hang this 14th Amendment protest on.
100%. And I encourage everybody to go to the legal authority page at nowmarch.org. That completely will debunk any misconception that Trump v. Anderson removed his disqualification. Didn't touch it. Didn't touch the fact that he's an adjudicated insurrectionist. That is what he is. He's disqualified from this office. It only attached to his ballot access, as you explained. And I just want to say to your viewers that have been talking about the popular vote or what Trump has, even if we take the numbers at face value and say there was no manipulation, no interference, even no voter suppression, take the numbers at face value, Donald Trump got somewhere around a third of eligible voting adults that supported him in this election. A third. No mandate, not anywhere near a half. That's the kind of support that he has. You look at the marches around the country. You look at who's going to join us on 314. That's the real energy. That's what this country really represents and wants. We are not on his side. The masses are with us.
That is certainly true. And the kind of upheaval that we're seeing, the tumult in Washington, is one that will be, I think, not washed down easily with all of that public that you're talking about that didn't vote for him, which, as you say, is a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, and I don't mean to put it in kind of like, it'll be interesting to see from an intellectual perspective. I mean, I really think when this pushback starts, and it's already begun, and there's as you know, there's the no spend day at the end of the
February 28th. Yep.
February 28th.
Yes.
And there's a sort of like speak with your wallet. I like that. These are ways in which you can make noise against this machine. Now, it's a complete takeover. In my view, the coup is complete. But and I made that call early, as did others, I think. But my point is simply that when you replace all the generals or the Joint Chiefs, et cetera, you are with loyalists. You bring some guy in out of retirement. You wake him up, dust him off, and you say you're going to be running the Joint Chiefs. What? I mean, it's a sign. And so noise has to be made. I applaud you and your group for making it. These are questions that need to be asked. And I don't think that you can put these issues to bed too easily. I think, you can look in the comments section of even this conversation and see how some people want to put them to bed. And you say, hey, look, this has all been talked about. There's nothing to see here. And then there are others who say, look, it's clear. I mean, and you can see by Musk's disposition. You could even see by the way in which Elon Musk had the results of the election hours before it was called. Yes. These are things that also have been talked about openly. So again, that might be circumstantial, but nonetheless, it's not irrelevant. So I applaud you, Jessica. And again, your podcast, how often do you do it?
Well, I schedule it every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern live, but I do shorts throughout the week. Like we had Greg Palast on last week. I have guests on frequently throughout the week that we put up on Lights On. But it's on YouTube, Jessica Denson channel on YouTube. That's where you'll find the Lights On podcast. And I'll put in a plug for nowmarch.org. Also, Free Speech for People has the Impeach Trump Again petition, if you want to go there. And Election Truth Alliance, don't take it from me. They're doing the analyses. They're doing the data, the work. So go to those three websites and check that out.
There's your website. And I do, there's your YouTube channel. I do love their work, the Stat Guys. In fact, I want to get one of them on the show. It's very funny. I was watching a bunch of their stuff and I'm very impressed. So Jessica Denson, Lights On is the podcast. You're a friend of the show. You're welcome back anytime, and we'll definitely be in touch. Good luck in March with the march. Okay. Jessica Denson, everybody. Right. I am, I think Musk had internal exit polling data ahead of time, says CC Ryder, or Secretary of State data posted on the website, just being rational as a tech person. Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, I don't know that... that was what was happening, but clearly, I mean, exit polling data that quickly, maybe, okay, possibly. I'm, let me just look at this. Ron Sharon says, glad I found the Mark Thompson Show. Reminds me of my many moments with Ron Owens at KGO. Isn't that nice? Thank you, Ron. Thank you for finding us, and I love being found, Thank you, Ms. Denson. Says Citizen Morgan. Yeah. Happy Enough says 300,000 votes suppressed by KKK in 5 swing states. Again, there's a lot of this stuff out there. I do think when it comes to voter suppression, Greg Palast is a good place to start and to really see the revelations associated with that. Musk isn't a tech person, Mark. Where can I place a bet that the losing side of the next election, no matter which side, will claim fraud and a stolen election? I'd totally put down money. Yeah, well, I mean, the Republicans were. It's just interesting to me. There was, all this talk from Donald Trump about how the system is so rigged and so flawed, et cetera. And yet when he won, I don't see any commissions put together. I don't see any investigations. No, in fact, he's getting rid of everybody. The Federal Election Commission, he's essentially dismantling it. They can't even have a meeting. They need a quorum. They can't have it. Josh says Musk isn't a tech person, Mark. He hires tech people. I think there's some truth to that. We've really built this image of Elon Musk in a big, big way. And I think he's done big things, and he thinks in big ways. But it's also, he's been dining out on that image to the point that he's running the government. It's extraordinary. I mean, it must be clear to you that Trump doesn't know what's going on in the government. He's got a few things that he cares about. He likes the DEI stuff and the immigrant stuff, and he signs those executive orders, and then they really build these executive orders that he has to sign, and then it's explained after the fact. He does these photo ops, and then what does he do? He goes to play golf. We gave you the golfing stats the other day. He's golfed most of his presidency, which is fine. It helps to enrich him because when he goes to golf at his various, at Doral or wherever, he has Secret Service, and Secret Service has to stay in those places, and they're charged, that is to say, we are charged top rate. We don't get a government discount. So there are ways in which he can both relax, let Musk run everything, and also kick it on the golf course while he makes money with taxpayer dough going into the Secret Service. By the way, look, guys, I get it. I have a bias against Trump and Musk and his minions. That's my bias. But if they were doing things that I thought needed to be done, I would say, hey, you got to give the devil their due. They're doing this and that and the next thing. But I don't feel as though any of the moves they've made, the reckless way in which they dismiss a bunch of federal employees, some of whom are critical to running government, I don't think that's in any way defensible. They are not looking at waste, fraud, and abuse. You don't look at waste, fraud, and abuse by firing everybody. I mean, without regard to whether or not they're part of waste, fraud, and abuse. Many of the people that they are firing just received what are those called, Kim, when you meet with your employer and the employee review meetings? Or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Employee reviews, yeah.
Yeah, stellar employee reviews. Yeah. I was reading just yesterday about all these stellar employee reviews from people who have been dumped. And then you send them a memo saying you've been dumped because of the poor quality of your work, because legally, that's the only way you can dump them. It's an outrage. I mean, it's insulting. These are people who are doing public service. And you, Elon Musk, do no public service. Well, Mark, what are you talking about? He does SpaceX. SpaceX is a company. He makes money off of that company. SpaceX isn't a favor associated with public service. In fact, a lot of what he's doing is jacking up those government contracts that he has now to even higher levels. So even as he's firing all these people to save money, find money in the system, a bunch of it is going to go back to him. It's really outrageous, and it's illegal on many levels, as we've detailed for you here. Keith K says, hey, Mark, I don't hear anyone talking about the House special election in Florida's 1st and 6th district. People should donate to the Democrats and flip those seats. Yeah, and I'm guilty too. I haven't spoken much about that either. Thank you, Keith K. Special elections in 1st and 6th district in Florida. Yeah, Kim? Yeah.
Do you think that, this is such a weird question, but it sticks in my mind that if Democrats were in charge and all of the things we wanted to get done were being done, and we were steamrolling over everyone, but we were doing it in this way that put the Constitution in jeopardy and put our way of government and life in jeopardy, there would still be calls from within to stop. That we can get done what we want done in a different way, in the right way, in the way we've always done things. But I feel like with MAGA folks, it's our way or the highway, and be damned with the way it gets done. We don't care as long as we're getting our way. And
well, you're talking about the ends justify the means, is what you're saying.
I don't know
which
how
is
you
really
make,
there. Yeah.
I don't know how you make that point to people that that how you do it is as important as doing it.
Well, the point is we have a constitution. We do have barriers up. There are aspects of oversight in this government that have to be respected. But what they've done is they've removed all the oversight. They got rid of those inspectors general. They got rid of the JAGs at them on the military side. So you really don't have anything balancing this wanton use of power. And so you're right. There is and I've talked about this before over the last few years, because I think in their movement, and it's funny, we're going to have a guest coming up, and really a great book she just wrote about just this. One of the pillars to the establishment of the authoritarian rise of Trump and his crew in MAGA is associated with religion, because there is a transactional relationship that they have. And when you feel as though, transactional meaning that Trump has, delivered for them in some of the ways that they want. When you feel as though the soul of America has been threatened by DEI, the libs, the Green New Deal, the weakness of America that we need to get back, when you feel that the soul of America is being lost because of the libs, then you'll do anything to restore the soul of America. To restore the essence of America, which you feel the libs are draining out or watering down, whatever. So it's really that which becomes the end that you will justify doing anything to achieve. And so that's the ends justify the means world of, I think, MAGA. We need to restore the soul and strength of America. There's a lot of masculinity. There's a lot of that flex associated with that. That's why Make America Great Again is, even though it was jacked from Ronald Reagan, it has become so powerful and has achieved so much political momentum. But to your point, they've thrown out everything in the process, meaning constitutional restrictions.
How you make the point, how you get people to understand that they're killing a person instead of just amputating a pinky toe. Like, how do you make that point and get people to understand that you're throwing away something amazing in order just to get the things that you want for the right now?
I mean, you're seeing now the fragility of the democracy. This democratic republic really has been dismantled. They have dismantled at the highest levels this democratic republic. Now, this is a rise of an authoritarian regime, and they will rule in an authoritarian way. And it's scary, for sure. But to your point, like, how do you show, how do you communicate?
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, as I've told you, and I get a lot of grief for this from you guys, and that is Trump is good. I mean, he's good at what he does. Yeah. Trump is good at playing this political stuff. He's a media figure. He's used to being on. He's comfortable. He makes things up. And when you decide, which he decided, in his own way, years and years and years ago, that you never need to be tethered to any real truth. You can say whatever you want, and as long as you say it the right way and over and over again, it will prevail as fact. He's very hard to bring down. Mm-hmm. And as I say, the coalition around him, those who want to see the right rise, you have the alt-right, you have MAGA, you have the religious coalitions. These are all helping to propel him to the marginal victory that he had. And again, we'll talk more about this, but I think that's what's happening. They think only others will be hurt. They cry and cry when it's them. Hard to sympathize. Exactly. I mean, it is true that their anger and their grievance was played out in, let's bring Trump in. He's angry like I am. And, I think that it was sort of like, damn the details. Let's bring him in. Look, he got a lot of votes. We can say that the election was stolen or the election was manipulated, the outcome is not legitimate. I think you can say all those things. And as I say, I'll take a meeting on all of that. But it is true that Trump tapped into a bunch of grievances that people and different constituencies had, and they bought the BS. And he does sling the BS better than anybody else. And so that's what I mean when I talked about him as a once-in-a-generation political figure. He is that good and was able to hoodwink enough of the American public, in my judgment. Now, again, to Cece's point, or I believe it was Cece, who said, they're going to find out they're voting against their interests. Of course. But that's the remarkable thing, that he's convinced so many to vote against their interests. So, I mean, again, we're going to get into other topics and a lot of specifics. I think the specifics are important, what's going on in Washington now, but that's a little bit of the overview as to how we got here. So, yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash the like button if you would. Smash it like a boss. I'm told that it helps us in the world of YouTube. Yeah. So it's the
iron rod.
It's the thumbs up, and do please subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and share any portion of the show that you particularly find interesting. Share it across social media, or share a link to the live show. We are a 2-hour live show. We do it every day, from roughly 2 to 4 in the East and 11 to 1 in the West. If you tuned in late, the Eagles say they're not going to show up at the White House, or their invitation. If you are here even later, you probably missed that everyone on this show has to send me 5 reasons that you have done something last week to be productive to this show. Otherwise, you'll face termination. That is the new law of the land.
Why are you yelling?
9 to 11 in Maui, says Walter, is the show. Yeah, I should. Gosh, in Maui, imagine. Oh, my God. Really something. We also talked about Roberta Flack earlier in the show. It's true. R.I.P. Roberta. Yeah. What a beautiful, beautiful songstress. Well, I know it's almost the end of the show. And I actually had a lot more that I wanted to get to. And we haven't even done Kim's news.
I know.
And I have a story here. Oh, this is somebody who wants me. I heard this is. I heard. Oh, okay. I've told that story. We had Kim tell the story of how she rescued her son.
Oh,
this is somebody who wants to know. What if you missed it? Kim's son almost died in the surf last week, and Kim rescued him.
Yeah.
As did Kim.
Yeah.
And somebody here wanted me to tell that story again, but it's not. There's not much to tell. I mean, there is a lot to tell. All right, I'll tell it just in 60 seconds or less.
It's been done.
It's been done, but in 60 seconds or less, Kim goes to the beach with her son for his birthday. His name is Jacob. She warns him, be careful, big surf out there. And the surf was just lapping up against his lower legs. It wasn't a big deal. He's standing there as this tumultuous surf moved in. Knocked him off his feet, though, one of these waves. And then the wave that immediately followed, which was also quite big, pulls him out to sea. And then Kim, witnessing all this, had a crisis because, on the one hand, she sees that her son is being pulled out to sea. On the other, she just bought a new outfit and she doesn't want to get it wet.
No.
And she's sitting there on the beach going, what do I do? And she starts looking around for somebody else to rescue Jacob.
No.
There was nobody around. And she thought, oh my God, I can't take this outfit off. It's a brand new outfit. I don't want to get it wet. But finally, as she sees his little hand exposed from the sea, she jumps into the waves and she swims out to get him. She herself being pulled under. And she grabs her son and swims with him, even again as bigger and bigger waves are crashing and pulling the two farther out. Kim finally emerging from the surf, exhausted, winded, her son having taken in water in all of this, and she hoists the young man above her head to the applause of the crowd that had assembled on the beach. It was unbelievable. No. It's no wonder she doesn't want to tell that story. It's so self-aggrandizing, probably, but she is a living hero. Our Kim. Amazing.
Kim, how are you?
Yes.
The story gets different every time you tell it.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. What happened to Kim's outfit that she didn't want to get wet? I don't know. That's a part of the story we'll never know. Mark, dare you embellish the life rescue story? How dare I embellish nothing. I finally told the story that she was playing down. I told it the way it actually happened.
No.
So, Very well done, Kim. Congratulations. I'm glad little Jacob is okay. That's most important. Yes. All right.
Which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, my God. I didn't even get to... tomorrow, I'll talk about the reciprocal tariffs that are just going to be hellish on global trade. And I will say that... and I'll say this just because this is so much a part of their playbook. I mentioned to you the reason they went after USAID. I mentioned this earlier in the show, and I mentioned it right away when they went after USAID. I said, no wonder. USAID is pursuing an investigation of the way that Musk turned off Starlink in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And there's no wonder that they're going after the IRS. There's no wonder, because look at everywhere they're going. They're going to places that have either ongoing litigation or investigation with Elon Musk. I mean, that's not a coincidence. They're not starting at the most wasteful institutions in American government if they're so concerned with waste, fraud, and abuse. They're going to the places, some of which have super small budgets like USAID, that had an issue with Elon Musk. FAA, same story. They fined Elon Musk for various things concerning his rocket launches that went bad, and they had to blow up the rocket, and that forced them to replot the ways in which air traffic was going, and that's a federal violation. But so what does he do? He fires the guy at the FAA, fires a bunch of others at the FAA, and now the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration has laid off 4% of its workers. You're probably saying the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, what do they have with Elon Musk? Well, they've raised questions about crashes involving the self-driving technology that's in Teslas. So these layoffs at this department, which again just hit over the weekend, these layoffs do seem to coincide with a lot of the investigations that seem to focus on Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his technologies. What's that?
They're investigators and scientists who are really the only people able to hold Musk account for what's going on with Tesla and figure out for real whether or not the automated driving function is good or not good or causing people to be injured. So he just took an axe to that whole department.
Yeah, one of the investigations into Tesla is based on 4 accidents involving technology that the car maker calls supervised full-serve driving, which can steer, brake, and navigate Tesla cars in some situations. In one of those crashes, a Tesla struck and killed a pedestrian, according to the documents at the agency. In another of the accidents, a person was injured. Tesla's self-driving technology relies on cameras to survey what's going on with the car's surroundings. That's in contrast with competitors like Waymo, which is a unit of the same company as Google, that uses laser and radar to recognize objects. So it's a different kind of technology. And the Traffic Safety Agency has been looking into whether Tesla's tech failed when visibility was poor or because of glare from sun, fog, or dust. And Musk is arguing that Tesla's safe driving technology is safer than human drivers. It's also critical, is this technology, to Tesla's future and their share price. Tesla's sales have flagged. They fell up 1% last year, even as the global market for electric vehicles went up 25%. So Musk has shifted the company's focus to autonomous driving technology and plans for a self-driving taxi. So it's away from the world of selling you cars and more to selling you the self-driving Teslas in taxis.
I mean, if the technology is really that great, wouldn't you welcome a scientific inquiry into its effectiveness?
Thank you. Yeah. All right, Kim, I want to, so anyway, that's another agency that they are dismantling. So I did promise something, Tony, and I'm going to deliver it. And it's true, by the way, I am dumping my car, by the way. Delwood Kelp is right. I do have a Tesla and I'm getting rid of it.
Who is the actress that did that recently? Who Who
Sheryl Crow did it, and then
that's right.
they busted on Sheryl Crow because, well, she did it 6 months ago, but she's only announcing it now. Yeah, all right, whatever. Delwood is a MAGA person. Tesla stock price is up 88% from a year ago. Gosh, I hope you got it, Delwood. Hope you were in there. Now, I want to quickly share with everyone, Tony, the pushback in one of these meetings. I know, and then we'll wrap up around here. There were big shows of pushback in a lot of these town halls and where politicians went to visit with constituencies. This is one person literally being dragged away as she was making noise during this meeting. It was, I say meeting, it was like an open forum for constituents. It was, I believe that was in Idaho. I'm not sure. But it wasn't just that one. There was a lot of pushback in other meetings as well. Do you have another, Tony? I thought there was one other. But the idea is that at these meetings at which Congress people show up and generally interact with their constituency, they're getting a lot of blowback right now. Now, some of it, as they say, is performative. Here, this is the one that maybe a few of you have seen. This is his town hall, Congressman McCormick. Here we go.
They're hired in the government, even if they're not paid. They're government employees by contract. They are. That's just the simple truth. And I can show you the paperwork on that too. We'll post all that. That's fine. You can disagree with me all you want, but I'm just telling you the way it is. And I get that you don't agree with me and you think I'm not telling the truth. But that's unless they're lying to me, and you can say they are. So who? Okay.
Support for President Trump.
Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, congressmen, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
Wow. A little loud, Tony, but...
In Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. They came in a little hot, but you get the idea, too, that there is
the answer
more
to
and more.
that? There is no answer, probably.
Well, he tried to answer it, and then the crowd shouted him down. So that's Georgia, and it's a district in Georgia, I believe, that's fairly red. So he is getting some blowback. I'm fairly red, meaning I think it's sort of purplish. But that said, there is more of that now, and there's going to be more. So one of two things will happen. Either politicians like McCormick will have answers for their constituencies, and they'll have to sit there and kind of take that blowtorch of anger, or they're going to have fewer of these meetings.
Stop the meetings. Yeah,
and I think it might be the latter. I mean, they're burrowing in, and so that's sort of where that sits. But I think that this noise is important. I just wouldn't get high on my own supply if I were you. If you're really part of the pushback against this administration, I would caution you against being too excited about this pushback. This is all part of what they have baked into their strategy. They know there'll be pushback on the street. But what's happened now at the federal level is scary. I mean, again, see the beginning of the show where there is more and more evidence that these guys are taking pages from all successful authoritarian regimes. Purge the military of anyone who is not loyal, clean house and hire those who are loyal, and with the military in tow, you can do anything. So the part of that plan we've seen play out over the weekend in Washington, and the dumping of distinguished service people for those. I mean, you know, the new head of the Joint Chiefs isn't even a 4-star general. It's crazy.
They got rid of a really good guy, too.
Oh, my God. With distinguished service. That is so true. But I'll tell you something else. This is at the end of the show. I'm going to share one more morsel with you that really bothered me over the weekend. The way in which the media is talking about this, mainstream media, is all wrong. Tony, play a little bit. This was This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Is being hosted by Martha Raddatz. Listen to the copy. Listen to the way they've written her words, and she has to sign off on them, of course, for the way they've characterized what we're talking about, which is the replacing of top generals and military officials. Go ahead, please, Tony.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos starts right now.
Pentagon purge. In an unprecedented move, President Trump dismisses key military leaders, including the country's top-ranking officer, Joint Chiefs Chair General C.Q. Brown. What does it mean for the future of the U.S. military? Former member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Army General George Casey, responds. Plus, Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Words.
Yeah.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.
Trump tests his party with a pivot
This
toward
is sort of
Russia.
a super teaser she's talking about. When she gets done with this, you'll hear what her first line, I believe, really made me
But
mad.
after nearly morning and welcome to this.
Once you try a
Here it is. Give me that. Though. Good morning and welcome to This Week.
There's a spot he has to get through first.
We'll get through this spot.
Yeah.
That's what I really want you to hear. Good morning and welcome to This Week. No, we're not gonna have it.
Here she comes.
Morning and welcome to This Week. After just 1 month in office, President Trump and his allies have upended Washington. The latest move coming Saturday as Elon Musk sent out a message to all federal workers demanding they outline their weekly accomplishments by Monday night or face losing their jobs. Plenty of federal workers have already been shown the door. And in one of the most startling moves, late Friday night, Trump took aim at the Pentagon in an unprecedented upheaval of senior leadership. The President and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing the firing of 2 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, including the chairman, General C.Q. Brown, and 4 other general officers, with the administration's ire over diversity efforts in the military by those leaders appearing to be at the center of it all. The move also comes as President Trump is taking aim at Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, the administration holding talks with Russia without Ukraine at the table, baselessly calling Zelensky a dictator.
There you go. I'll tell you, to be fair, I like that she said baselessly talking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. I don't like the fact that they use words like in an historic shakeup, the president replaced the head of the Joint Chiefs. I mean, there's so many ways to characterize this as alarming, okay? And instead, there's kind of a sane washing or normalcy washing that's going on with Trump and these decisions to replace these military leaders. And that takes it to a different place. I mean, this is really a coup, again, in slow motion. You've fired all of the inspectors general, as we've showed you. You're firing these JAGs. You're firing the essentially the judicial arm of the military. You're firing these non-political heads of military, different arms of the military. It's extraordinary, and you're replacing them with those. And you can say this. I'm seeing this. Kittren says, I disagree with you, Mark T., on so many levels regarding the military. This is one military that will not fall in line with authoritarian rule. This is America.
If they change the brass, if they change the personnel, it sure will.
What you do in the military, you know this, it sounds like you might have some background in the military, Kittren Peppers, is you respond to what? The orders you're given. And the guy who runs the military really is the president. And if he's put loyalists in place, they're not going to say, my loyalty is to the Constitution and not you, sir. Instead, and he's making sure of this ahead of time, there is a litmus test. The new head of the Joint Chiefs has said, I would die for you, Mr. President. That's what he said. They ask them ahead of time where their loyalty is. So I'd suggest to you, it's not that the military members are bad people. The military, the rank and file, for the most part, I'm sure are decent people trying to do the right thing and defend this nation. What I'm suggesting is that they're changing at the top the hierarchy that will give orders to those rank and file. And that is where the shoe pinches. So this is to be continued, but I think it's truly disturbing. So I've got to wrap up. I've got to wrap up around here. Tony, did you have something for me? No, you got it. We played it, right?
Yep.
I'm trying to. Is there anything in the way of Jane Fonda won a SAG Lifetime Award? Her acceptance speech was quite powerful. I didn't see it. Let me guess. She was political?
Yes, she was very political. Yeah.
No.
But she said some pretty powerful things as well.
Is she a big Trumpy? I haven't followed her lately.
No, I don't think
she's not.
I think you could say opposite day. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think, says Jimmy, just give me the truth, I don't think we realize how closely the Democratic leadership is connected and allied to Republicans' agenda under the guise of being capitalists. I think this, I mean, you're certainly right that, if you want to call them capitalists, I mean, we're all capitalists. I'm a capitalist too, in the sense that I believe capitalism is a better system than, for example, socialism, although there are many socialist aspects to our government. I mean, I don't know what our government's going to look like in a year. Maybe they're going to get rid of a lot of that. But we basically are we're a capitalist society with aspects of socialism built in. That said, I understand your point about Democratic leadership, but I think this is a bridge too far, even for them. I accept that there is money in politics to the point that they are getting fat at the trough from big pharma, from defense contractors, et cetera. But I don't know if that reducto that you did is just too big a reducto. Trump will suspend the midterm elections. This, thank you, Sports Hatch. This is a real thing. There are ways in which elections can be suspended or modified or postponed. And the only reason, I know you're saying, oh, Mark, please, this is more liberal nonsense. No, well, the only thing I would say is in 2020, he wanted his newly appointed attorney general. Remember, Barr was out, new guy in. This is the guy who everybody was pushing back again. How did this guy's the attorney general? Because he was a Trump loyalist, and Trump wanted him to announce that there were investigations into the election. He said that you don't have to actually have anything, just announce that there's been an investigation. I just need enough doubt sown to do the next things I'm going to do. Martial law, suspending this, that. The next, you can suspend habeas corpus. You can do a lot if you establish that there is an issue with elections. So now to the comment. It is possible. I mean, I don't know. Right now, I'd say they're not going to suspend the midterms, but I also think there are ways you can mess with the vote. I don't put anything past these guys. I really don't. I think they are throwing everything at this, and it's way outside traditional political strategies. February 28th is no spend day. Lamuk Jamaica says, yeah, that is the plan, right? My sister is a big one on that. No spending. And my sister spends, believe me. So she,
not that day, she doesn't.
I have to wrap up, but Louis says, hey guys, U.S. just voted against the UN resolution condemning Russia for its war with Ukraine. Wild. Absolutely wild. Mm-hmm. Mark can't fire me. John Cena, says Bald Thanos. I would never fire you. I would start an investigation against you. That's the way they do it, yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
They start the investigation. Then they get the IRS involved, and you have to defend yourself, and before you know it, you don't have any money. That's how stuff happens. Doug McNeely says, 5 things I did last week. Tuned into the Mark Thompson Show. Come on, I need more Doug McNeelys in my life. That's what I like. Thank you, guys. Tomorrow, David K. Johnston. He is the one who said, when Trump replaces the generals, that is when you know the coup is complete. We will talk to him about everything going on. I've got a big law and disorder. It's got nothing to do with Trump tomorrow. A man is free after 30 years in prison. I'll give you the story on that tomorrow. So it's not all Trump. Or Elon, but boy, they are serving up a lot of stuff to keep track of. Kim does the after party live next. Get over there and after party with her.
Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Out of time. Bye-bye.
Out of time, everyone. Thank you. and bye-bye.